Hello, and thank you for joining us today at eriktology.net. Unfortunately, Eric is dealing with a powerless ice storm situation up in Portland, Oregon. So we put together a mashup of 3 different videos. Hopefully you enjoy the content. Hopefully next week we'll be recording again this coming Sunday and then putting up new content for the following Shabbat. Again, thank you for joining us, and if you could just do us a favor, please like, comment, share, subscribe. The comments and the likes definitely help grow the channel, so that would be greatly appreciated. And we look forward to joining you again next week with some new content. But in the meantime, please enjoy this. These are 3 really good, shorter teachings. Thank you. Shalom. And I'd like to also pray for everybody out there who's dealing with these horrible winter storms all over the country.
We've been discussing the song of Yahuwah as given to Moshe. It's been a topic of discussion for the last couple days, and thought we'd put some of this on film to share here. Fred, what did you glean from the discussion of the last couple days?
Well, we've been looking at chapter 32 of Deuteronomy, which, as you said, has been called the Song of Moses. But just looking back in Deuteronomy 31, we learned that Moshe was about to die, and Yahweh commanded him to write down these words, and they really are some of the last words of the scriptures as many people had them for many years. The Torah ended with Deuteronomy, and this was really the last time that Yahuwah opened his heart to his people and shared with them his concerns about their future and about the direction that they would take. And I'm just struck by his concern for his people and his willingness to go to any length to bring them back into the fold, knowing that in the future they would stray. And we've been blessed that our friend Eric Bissell has been able to go back into the Paleo-Hebrew and really open this up in a new way, and he's found some information here that we don't see in the English translations.
Well, it's interesting because there's been a lot of talk lately about the Song of Moshe as in regards to 15th chapter in the book of Revelation, and there's a renewed interest here. And then after discussing this for the last couple of days, this is deep. This is like contract. This is start doing this and be my people, and then you're going to see everything that's promised. And that's the kind of a synopsis of what I'm getting out of this. Eric, you want to elaborate on this some?
Well, there's a couple different verses here which, as you pointed out, this is called the Song of Moses, or the Song of Moshe, as some people render his name in Hebrew, Moshe, which means to be drawn out, like to be drawn out of the water is literally what Moshe means. An interesting thing in verse 6, written in Hebrew as one of what Monty Judah refers to as the jots and tittles, the anomalies written in the text, where it's an enlarged letter Hey, the 5th letter of the alphabet, standing by itself. Now, that typically doesn't happen. It's not used as a word. It's used as a prefix to a word, sometimes meaning the. Literally, there's the word the. But this stands by itself. So unless you know what that letter means, as studying the letters of the alphabet, it means nothing. It's just a thing standing there. But the letter Hey basically means to reveal or put on display or draw attention to, like you have an open sign in a restaurant or something flashing saying, hey, look, we're open, come on in. So this is a subtle sort of meaning, because it doesn't find itself in English. It's this thing that's right there in the Hebrew, says, right here is the matter. This is the it that you've been looking for. And that particular verse says, unto Yahweh, then this word is gimel, or tagamalo, which is his camel. Unto Yahweh, his camel, this? Well, unto Yahweh, the word is like reciprocating or recompense or reward or paying wages or taking vengeance. This, and then the word for people also means as long as foolish. So you might look at it and say, well, unto Yahweh, reciprocating unto his people foolishness and not wise. And then this word is literally pronounced, hello, is he not your father? Is there another way to read that? Your owner, he made you. And then there's this word, which is where we get the word canon, ikanananaka, or you might say, which is basically, where are you? And it's this word that says, he has established you as a capstan, which on a boat is the thing by which the ropes are pulled around. It's the pivot point. It's like on a winch that says everything yanks on this, and if this isn't fixed, then everything's going to fall apart. Nothing can be pulled. The rest of this story and this song seems to be saying that the entire universe, he will rearrange, or he has told the story, which is to say written in the stars as he's lifted up his hand and put his work in the heavens. Everything is around Israel. And if Israel as his people fail to either keep his words or fail to keep their attitude about their position in him, which is to say Israel is the capstan of the universe, and everything Yahweh does is going to be throwing the ropes of rigging around them, and if they fail in their job, everything falls apart. And if they betray his trust, they themselves will be betrayed, but it's by their own hand that this has happened. And so I remember we were talking earlier, I remember a certain young lady years ago I was talking to in the church, and this was in confidence. She says, you know, God's kind of a dirty rat. You can't really trust him. He doesn't really do what he says he's going to do. You know, we have these songs, we sing to him, we give him tithes, and we show up every Sunday, but he just doesn't live up to his words. Frankly, he just doesn't. Oh, we'll still keep worshiping, we still believe, we still want our salvation and go to heaven and be with him forever, but don't count on him. By our experience, we know he's just going to let you down. You're not going to get healed. You're not going to blah, blah, blah. But this song, very specifically in the very beginning, says, where Yahweh himself says, I'm telling you guys right out of the gate, I swear by my own life which is unto eternity, which is to say, as I live forever, thus declares Yahweh, not just raising his hand, but both hands, he says, as my life is forever, so are my words. I am for you, and my rachem, my consolation, comfort, compassionate mercy upon you as my people is ever flowing and perpetual. It will never cease. However, when you turn away from me, this is the way it works. I hold up a mirror which looks like your enemies. Your enemies coming against you are yourself coming against you. It's your own hand which has done this to you. And do not ascribe to me being the rat. Do not say that I haven't lived up to my own words. Do not say that I am untrustworthy. Oh, you better count on it. He is saying, I promise you, your way will return upon your own head. And when you are bitter and you yield to feelings of grief, despair, anger, and vexation, then what comes at you is bitterness, grief, despair, and vexation. And he says, when you regard my words, and you stand on my words, and you seek my face by seeking my ways, to do them with knowledge, wisdom, comprehension, obedient application. This all has to do with what I've been told was Gnosticism, or being so... I had somebody once who was a so-called prophetic couple. They said, to think is carnal, which is to say corruptible, and live by the Spirit. These words say quite otherwise. We can't go into the details because there's not enough time. This is supposed to be just a few-minute thing. But what I found in this song of Yahuwah as given to Moshe, he says this, in a nutshell. I have positioned the entire universe around you, and all other nations find their bearing based on what you, Israel, do. I have made you the head, the chief, the topmost from the beginning, and all the other nations fit like a jigsaw puzzle around you are finding their boundaries. And if you betray, and he said, I know you will, but when you betray the covenant, you drop and they're elevated, and they will dominate you, they will squish you, they will despise you, they will torment you until the day that you return to my words. Now, I don't know that that's an exact length of time, but there's a verse in here where Yahweh says, you think that you have gotten ripped off because I haven't lived up to my word? You guys have betrayed the covenant. You, Israel, you are the ones that I deserve compensation for, and every single drop of blood will be paid. And until the wages are full that you have paid for, you're treacherously betraying our covenant, this will not turn. Well, we believe by looking at these words that the time of the end of that curse was 2010, the end of the 2,730-year curse, which means, as far as I can see, it's been paid. Besides of which, Yeshua dying on the cross, spilling his blood, which is a whole different matter. But what I'm saying is, I think where we're at today is that he's giving us the opportunity and the timely occasion to return to these words and listen with a heartfelt regard, a desire on our part with consent from within us to teshuvah out of love. We want to be his people. We ask him to be our Elohim. It's not a matter of you better with a whip on our back. It's like, please be my Elohim. I choose to be your people. I am Israel. I want to be the people of his favor as the pupil of his eye that he looks to as the desire of his heart to have a people. Those are his words, his desire. What does this whole world history look like from his point of view? He said, you guys hate me. You I created to be my love, and you despise me and my words and my things, my day, my festivals and Moedim, my sense of justice and righteousness you find to be despicable. Goodbye. And he says he will leave, go back to his place, and sit down and take a Shabbat, and he will hide his face, hide his countenance, verse 20, and allow everything to go. I said, I'll see what becomes of you. So as we were discussing, Fred, maybe you can describe to them, as we were discussing, that this whole world for the last 3,500 years, we think, oh, where's God? He's a big jerk. Look at if God's in control, then he must be some beast, some monster, because look at all the stuff happening. Can you articulate that?
Well, in verse 20 he says, I will hide my face from them, and I will see what their end will be. It gives us the indication that because of turning away from his words, he turned away from us. And he's allowed us to be attacked by and it says here, a nation of no people, to come under the judgment of a vile nation. And is it possible that for the last 2,000 years, maybe more, he has literally hid his face from us, and we have not had the ability to communicate with Yahuwah? We've forgotten his name. In 286 BC, Yahuwah's name was systematically removed from the Torah and replaced with God and the Lord. And how many people since then have called upon Yahweh? How many people have prayed to him, have wanted to have a relationship with the Yahuwah of these scriptures, the one who said that all who call upon my name will be saved? What's encouraging in this chapter is in verse 36. He turns it around and he says he'll repent himself for his servants. And that's what I find so hopeful in this, is that there'll come a time when he will, his people will wake up and they'll remember his name, and then he'll begin to act on their behalf. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
There's the verse 25. And this is what I was making reference to about thinking, about considering. Verse 25, this is my translation of it. Unless, now this word unless means it's going to go a certain way, but there's the option of turning, but that option of turning is now in our court.
The big if.
Unless there is intelligent improvement prudent consideration, acting wisely with understanding. Unless there's that, this is what's going to happen, which has been happening all these years. Wasting desolation by drought and sword will permeate right through any defenses, terrifying even elite young soldiers, even innocent virgin little girls, suckling babies along with old men, with crippling panic. There's another interesting verse in verse 34. Well, we could go on and on. There's so much more in this. But he basically says, here's the thing, as we were discussing. You look at the world for the last 2,000 years, the last 3,000 years, we think, when he was designing this universe, the history of the world, there's the movie, you know, the history of the world and stuff, and war after war, inventions, somebody comes up with something great, somebody else steals it, and somebody else perverts it, and somebody else withholds it and restricts it from the masses so that they have to pay, and they have to row the ship of state like galley slaves with the whip on their back, with circumstances, and all the benefits have been just taken away from us. And do you think he's up there smiling, saying, ah, yes, just as I imagined it would be. I'm sure glad I made this place. I mean, it got so disgusting to him that he wiped it all out in the flood in Noah's day, and of course, we hear that he's going to do it again with fire next time. But, I mean, look at what's happening on the face of the earth. Do you think this pleases him? Did he design all this stuff, and he looks back down at us and say, I love watching this show? Or is he sitting up there saying, you know, it could have been otherwise. I told him. I gave him. There was a place where it says, verse 36, however, all the while Yahweh stands ready to aggressively fight either for or with his people. Regarding his obedient, worshipful servant, his compassion is perpetual, ever flowing towards the repenter who is promised to find consolation when he understands, turns to observe with reverence, shows himself to fear with perception the exhibition, in which case the objective of weakness has been accomplished. The purpose behind exhausting his hand with helplessness is no longer necessary, so the restriction of detainment and sterility can be abandoned. That which has been woody, pressed and squeezed. The definition in the dictionary says, like constipation, where nothing's happening, is released to flow with a legacy of help. Yahweh says, basically, in another verse, that he has stored up, ever since the beginning, he has stored up the promised benefits to be unloosed, opening the windows of heaven and pouring it out on the generation of his people who will choose to be his people according to the sworn oath, the agreement, the covenant that our forefathers made with him on Mount Sinai back all these years. We look at the history of the world and say, this place stinks, this place is rotten, this place is, let's just die and get on to the next thing already. It didn't have to be so, it wasn't meant to be so, it could have been otherwise, and I really think that based on his words, we have a shot at turning this whole thing around. There's a verse that talks about adding oil and allowing something to spin and turn, again, like the capstan. We're the capstan, just supposed to be able to allow things to turn, and we haven't. But if we go back, regard his words with a favorable attitude, this whole thing's going to turn. And this, like this teeter-totter where Israel was up, they betrayed him, so they went down. The other nations are up. The other nations got a hold of the words. The other nations have kept the words, and by their clerks and clerics and clergy, they have distorted the words, disarranged his face, given us the wrong perception of him, which is why we call out in prayers and with a pure heart of saying, please help, and he can't hear. Why can't he hear? His word says, you don't listen to my words, I plug my ears and I can't hear your words. Even though you scream because your enemies are tormenting you and tearing everything I gave you apart, you don't hear me, I don't hear you. My relation to you is a mirror of your relationship to me. But these words tell us, if we turn our hearts, he will turn his favor, and his face will shine upon his people, Israel, his obedient, worshipful servant, and he will backlash, is the word, backlash with a vengeance of fiery fury upon his enemies, which is his people's antagonists.
He makes that clear out of the gate. He warns people straight off. He goes, if you don't regard my Torah, your prayers are an abomination. He tells you that straight out. But
how many prayers have gone up? And we think, oh, we're praying to the Creator, we're praying to the Almighty. Why do things look the way they do? Because we have betrayed His words. And as a matter of fact, I've heard it said that when Yeshua had His hands nailed to the cross and said, it is finished, then that means this is the entire Old Testament.
3/4 of the book, throw it away.
This whole thing was made obsolete, abolished, by the fact of Him saying, it is finished. Furthermore, just for the sake of consideration, that if we think about this, they said that up to the day He said, it is finished, everything that came before, which means that the 3 years of His ministry, which is virtually everything in the 4 Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, also was abolished when He said it is finished. So by that reasoning, the Lord's Prayer is obsolete. The Beatitudes is obsolete.
Well,
every parable and every teaching makes no regard, no matter, because He said it is finished. I do not believe that.
That, you know, it's funny you make that point, because there's a website that's against anything Hebraic, Joyfully Growing in Grace. You're familiar with her.
Sure.
She made that statement about the Beatitudes. Well, you've just thrown out the Beatitudes. She goes, well, of course, that was before the cross.
There you
I'm
go.
like, what?
I'm not making this up. This
No, we're
is
not
a
making
common
it up.
teaching.
That's the sad thing. But the point, or the thing that I really got out of these studies is we can be that generation. It's lying right there. I've seen messianic movements. I'm not going to name names here, but some popular people that still want to have one foot in the old church and just kind of mend fence with them and just rub shoulders with them. But we got to come away from that. We can't do that. We can't mix and mingle. We got to get serious. He'll pass us by if we don't.
That's absolutely, I agree. I think that we have a shot, but it's not like this is destined to be our day where, oh yes, we will regain the kingdom. He will pass us by if we fail to return to the significant regard in honoring His words as He gave them to Moshe, and we draw them out like something buried underwater or buried under the earth. In fact, there's a verse here. I want to read the last couple verses of this chapter, but go ahead, Fred. What were you going to say there?
Oh, I was agreeing with both of you there. He'll pass us by if we don't hear these words and do them, just like every generation before us.
See, I've got the attitude that, well, we're just waiting for Him. We're just hanging around and we're just doing Torah until He gets here.
He's
well,
waiting
are
for
we?
us.
Yeah, exactly.
He's waiting for us.
Exactly.
Verse 39. Again, this is the eriktology translation, a little different than what you might read. Check it out right now. Observe. It is on exhibition to understand clearly, which is to say, no tricks. Thus I am. I am it. My hand. Ain't Elohim with me. Nothing and nobody beside me. I stand alone. Absolute truth. And the word there is like doorposts and like columns, an axiom, and the picture comes to mind of this Arc de Triomphe there, and I believe it's in Paris, where there's just this giant arch standing there. It looks like you could never knock it over. That's this picture of just, this is the axiom of truthfulness. I will quicken recovery with vigorous life, that which I have smitten as my enemy with my arrows. I am healer. I recover the dead. I am life-saver. My hand rescues from the depth of the abyss, sunk in the shadows. He's saying, it doesn't matter what it looks like on the surface. It could be buried in the deepest abyss, and He will recover it and bring it back to life. He has smitten His enemy with His arrows. He's talking about Israel. Because Israel betrayed Him, He has called in Israel's enemies, and He has allowed the adversary, the Hasatan, to dog and attack and to viciously bite at His people, and He Himself has been the adversary of His people. He said, the moment you guys turn to me, instantly that changes.
Well, let's do it.
He goes on to say, the last verse, our rejoicing and gladdening is the Goyim nations darkening and weakening, for so the likeness of His servant does. Or you might say, as the blood of His servant flows, the word for His servant there is obedi, where you get Obed, or obedience, or Obadiah. So the cosmos adapts to vindicate. The elaboration, He elaborates. He will arrange the universe to stand accordingly. vengeance he will return, either balm of healing or hostile vexation. Atonement, balanced scales of justice. I will render similarity, attaching to every man his confrontation with himself. This is what Yahweh does. He returns to each one of us our heart attitude. And if we align with the Torah, his instructions of righteousness, it's the word mishpat, which is balanced scales, then what comes back at us is righteousness, goodness, love, mercy. But that means we have to treat even our enemies, as he says, pray for your enemies, bless those who curse you. If we maintain a heart of not bitterness, not grief and anger, and regardless of what's going on, that's the difficult challenge of being a human. He will return, and those who hate his ways, that's the last verse of this song. He will vindicate the blood of his people, but we must turn to him for him to turn around the story of this planet.
Yes. Great discussion, you guys. Hopefully, on your return trip, we can go into this in more detail, because I think this is so significant.
Could I just end with a verse here? Verse 46. Set your heart unto all the words which I testify against you this day, that you may charge your children therewith to observe to do all the words of this Torah, for it is no vain thing for you. It is your life.
Hallelujah. Praise Yahuwah. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
I'm here with my friend Eric Bissell, and I'd like to ask him about a passage in Exodus that's always troubled me. It's in chapter 4, and at the end of Moshe's experience with Yahweh at the burning bush, he has specific instructions to meet with Pharaoh and tell him to let Yahweh's people go. And then it appears that he follows through to obey those instructions, and on his way is a troubling verse where in verse 24 it says that Yahweh met him and sought to kill him. And I've asked a number of Hebrew roots and Messianic teachers about this verse, and I've never really gotten a satisfying answer. So I'm anxious to hear what Eric has to say on this.
Why don't we start by reading in verse 19, where it kind of picks up that narrative of the story. You want to read that, like 19 through 23?
Sure. And Yahweh said unto Moshe in Midian, Go, return into Egypt, for all the men are dead that sought your life. And Moshe took his wife and his sons, and set them upon an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moshe took the rod of Elohim in his hand. And Yahweh said unto Moshe, When you go back into Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the wonders which I have put in your hand. But I will harden his heart, and he will not let the people go. And you shall say unto Pharaoh, Thus says Yahweh, Israel is my son, my firstborn. And I have said unto you, Let my son go, that he may serve me. And you have refused to let him go. Behold, I will slay your son, your firstborn.
Right before that, as you say, it was the burning bush incident where Moshe said, Who shall I say sent me? And he gives his name, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And then he says Yod-He Vav-He would be his Shem of remembrance or renown, or to commemorate his name throughout the generations. But in 4 verse 10, it says, Moshe replied to Yahweh, Please, my Lord, I'm reading the Stone's Tanakh edition here, I am not a man of words. Not since yesterday, nor since the day before yesterday, nor since you first spoke to your servant, for I'm heavy of mouth and heavy of speech. You might say that's kind of cumbersome or unable to walk, stumbling, you might say. Whether that was in his own mind or he had some sort of speech impediment, there's a fabled sort of story about that. That's another matter. But he's not a man of words, he says. But then Yahweh responds to him. Verse 11, Who makes a mouth for a man, or who makes one deaf or dumb or sighted or blind? Is it not I, Yahweh? So now go, I shall be with your mouth and teach you what you should say. There's something setting up here about words and about speaking. So, as you said, it sounds like Yahuwah is totally good with Moshe, no problem. He commissions him to go, and he sets him on his way. And then we come to verse 23. Do you want to read the next 3 verses there?
Starting with verse 24.
Yes.
And it came to pass on the way at the lodging place that Yahweh met him and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet. And she said, Surely a bridegroom of blood are you to me. So he let him alone. Then she said, A bridegroom of blood in regard of the circumcision.
Another way to read that is a damn bloody husband. And the reason we say damn, I'm not using some sort of profanity, but the Hebrew word for blood in Hebrew is dalet mem, or dam, dam, as in Adam, aleph dalet mem. But dam literally means red, like our shirts that we've got here.
Right.
And damim would be the plural, so you could say, is this bloods, or something about a blood between me and you? What is she actually saying? The only way it's translated as bloody. And then the word for husband is chet tav nun, which is to be related by marriage. But chet tav, with nun as a suffix, can have something to do with shattered, dismayed, terror, fear, simply the word for one. And it has something to do with being, if you look at chet tav kaf, changing the suffix from a nun to a kaf would mean cut, decided, determined, pronounced, and articulated. So there's something about speaking words here, thus causing something to happen, or coming to some sort of, you might say, legal or lawful status on account of words. This is all about the study of words. So, as you read in English, nobody knows why Yahuwah would all of a sudden call Moshe to go back to Egypt. He picks up his family, he puts them on the donkey, and they start traveling, and then all of a sudden, for no good apparent reason, Yahweh gets some bee in his bonnet and comes out to kill him.
That's the way it reads.
Kill who? Kill Moshe? Kill his son? Is it Yahweh or is it an angel of Yahweh? We can't tell from the way it's rendered in English. One problem is that in Hebrew, they use the letter Vav. Sometimes they've translated as you, or they, or he, or it. It might be reference to she, and you don't know if it's talking about the subject, or the object, or this person or that person. And so the various translators have a field day with it, and they kind of spin their story how they see fit. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because that's the trouble with Hebrew, especially compared to English. English is very exact and precise, but Hebrew, it leaves it wide open, and so somebody has to try to make sense of these words. So, people do the best they can. I'm going to read you those 3 verses in a different way of addressing it, and then we can discuss that. So this is how, using the eriktology method of looking at what each individual letter can be read to mean, what every 2 letters of a word can be read to mean, excuse me, something in my throat there, and every 3 letters, or if not every 4. Determining what's a prefix, what's a suffix, what's the root of the word. But it's also a matter of saying the way Hebrew's written, there's a word used here, and then another word over here, there's some other words in between, and then another word, and there's a theme, there's a thematic connection between these words, even though they're not back to back. And if one takes the liberty to tie these together as if it was intentional, that the author of this text, Yod-He-Vav-He himself, not just Moshe writing this or some scribe telling us what happened, has used these words in particular. Well, what I found is that if you're given one word that might have 3 or 4 meanings, and then another word with 3 or 4 meanings, and another word, someone might translate this word with this meaning and this word with this meaning, and so it tells a story and so forth, and you'll never make the connection. But by looking at the dictionary, you'll see that there's a common meaning
One of the words that they didn't use to translate in this word, and in this one, and in this one, tie it together. For example, the word derek can mean road, or the way, or the journey, or the method that you walk, but it can also mean to bend a bow. But it's also instructed or taught. So there's something about teaching somebody how to bend a bow, and then there's another word that he sought to kill him, but that word to seek also means to take aim, to aim at something. Well, if you bend a bow taking aim at something, something else has to be at the target. So it infers this first step, the second step, that infers a third step. Where's the third step? And that's the word, his death. So when it says Yahweh sought to kill him, I don't think it was necessarily meaning that. The other interesting thing is if you simply take the word spelled Yud, He, Vav, He, and say, okay, in Exodus 3, he tells us that's his memorial name. But it's a word. As a comparison, if you say, well, the word Yosef, Yod, Vav, Samik, Pei, that's Joseph's name. But if you see the word spelled Yod, Vav, Samik, Pei, you won't see that it says Joseph. Sometimes it'll say he will accumulate, because that's what the name means. So if every time you see Yod, Vav, He, you say, oh, that's Yahweh's name, it must say something about him. What the word means is he will cause it to exist, or he will annihilate it, destroy it so that it doesn't exist.
Okay.
That's what the word means. So therefore, if every single time there's a Yod, Vav, He, with or without vowel points, you say, oh, that's the sacred name, what if it's not? What if that's being led astray and that's not necessarily? So if you find the sacred name with certain vowel points, perhaps it's just being used as a verb, meaning he will cause it to exist, or that it doesn't exist.
Right.
That's another person's study that we won't get into. But what I'm saying here, let's go on with the narrative. And it just so happened along the way, they stopped to lodge overnight at the inn. That's the way it reads. The exact same word for inn, where you stay overnight, is the word for dictionary or lexicon, or the place that words are harbored. Could be read like this. He caused it to be so that they stopped for the night and began musing about words. The same word for derek, or way, or journey, or to bend the bow is the same word for amusement, or to muse, or to ponder and consider about words. He just said he was not a man of words. He's now, by the use of words, told to get up and go to Egypt to confront Pharaoh, which is a very intimidating task that he was given. And he's like, I'm not a man of words. What's all this about words? So now him and Zipporah have to stop for the night at the inn, and they start thinking about words. That's another way you can read this sentence. About the way they had been guided, given instructions of conduct, customs which separate them from all other people groups, the way you might insulate something delicate, and even how their own particular generation was isolated, unique from all others, time and place, as if it were being staged. Yahuwah had just spoken of Israel being his own son, so Moshe was examining the difficult question about who is it that invites such violence to himself, putting himself in the crosshairs, the target as it were, so as to be the enemy of Yah. Suddenly they realized, picturing a bent bow with the arrow aimed directly at the death of their own son. For they, having absent-mindedly neglected carrying out their own duties, Moshe is confronted by the fact that the present circumstances constitute the context of one who is disassociated and vulnerable to trouble. How can this possibly be averted? Now, all that I just read is the translation of verse 1. Just verse 1.
Verse 24.
Verse 24. I tried to look at every single word and look at all the different ways that it could be interpreted. Now here's verse 2. As a fire blazes up, Zipporah, early in the morning, in great distress, herself having taken hold of the teaching and conceiving them as her own, not learning about a foreign, distant culture, but owning them, she takes hold of a flint rock and cuts off the foreskin of their son, whereby he became lawfully in regulation, whereas his own walk had been inadvertently compromised, he is now declared fit. Circumcision accomplished the goal of exterminating the alien nature, cutting off the Gentile condition. Stipulations demand the sign as a necessary marking. It qualifies one to be recognized as son of Yahuwah. Distinguished from any other, he had commanded the regulation. So, here and now, by this cutting, it is decided, determined, and so articulated that you are mine, equal in identity, one blood, you and me. So thus, it was ordered at this most auspicious juncture that we stopped at this inn this night, just so you and I could discuss how we were taught to walk and notice that the way we were walking had a discrepancy. Now that's verse 2. Here's verse 3. And so he was encouraged, as one might tie his shoelaces. The idea here is something being loose and then you tighten it up so that you can walk right. He had been thinking that he was walking on the journey. He stopped, he noticed that something was loose, something didn't fit, something wasn't right. He looked at the words and he realized, man, I need to tighten up my walk so that I will have success. That's where Zipporah jumped in, circumcised the son, and says, now we're ready to go. He had been at the place of wondering, who exactly is he? Why me? Then at that time, it all came together. His appointment, his divine mission, trustee of the word. Zipporah had contended as one who wanted legal contract rights. She was laying claim, proclaiming that by this branding insignia, she was hereby related not only by marriage, but equally, cut of the same cloth, the same fear and honor, as you regard Aleph Tav, so do I, together as one. Now that's verse 3. It reminds me of this other verse in Genesis 20, verse 10, that Abimelech had just had this situation with Abraham, took Abraham's wife Sarah. He had a dream where trouble and ruin was coming to his own house, and he realized that Abraham had sort of misled him. And he says to Abraham, what did you see that you would do such a thing? What did you see that you should do such a thing? I might ask you, Fred, weren't you for generations long, a good Seventh-day Adventist going to church every single week, religiously, without fail, and believing it 100%? You must have seen something that caused you to behave differently. What did you see that you should do such a thing as to kind of jump ship and take a whole different route to walk?
I was confronted with these words just as Moshe and Zipporah were. And I came to a point where I had to say, am I going to hear and do this, or am I going to ignore it?
There was a lady, Cecilia, who wrote us an email the other day. Listen to what she says. She watched some of these various tapes. The pieces missing, but held within my soul, brought forth into tangible understanding, just for the sake of looking at the words. I think that's beautifully articulated. This is not about rebellion. This is about taking the time to stop and look at the words and realize something's wrong. To stop and ponder and say, why are we stopping here? Circumstances bring us to stop here. So we stop here, we start looking at words, and we realize something about the way we're conducting our life does not agree with these words.
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily Yahweh is meeting up with him and seeking to kill him, but what he noticed is that the circumstances which existed, that's Yod-Vav-He, had the arrow of destruction aimed at his own son. If Yahweh was going to kill those who were not his own son, by Moshe's son not being circumcised, put him into the category of being the guy that would be killed.
Yeah.
And he realized, according to the words, my son is standing in front of the target.
Right.
I need to do what Yahuwah says, so that as we walked according to the conduct and manner of the covenant, we're safe, we're protected, we're in under the shadow, under the covering. So to be under the covenant, you are under a curse, as he says in Galatians, I believe it is, because according to the covenant, If you step outside of the instructions, you will catch
Right.
the curse, you will catch the trouble from your adversaries, and they have the power and authority to overwhelm you. Like if you're out from under the umbrella,
Right.
the rain has the authority to get you wet.
Yes.
Yeshua said something about our adversary goes about as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. It's almost like Yahuwah says to the adversary, those people that are under this shelter of the covenant are safe and you can't touch them. But when they step outside of the covenant, now they're under the covering of the curse, which says, you may devour anyone you catch. It's a whole different way to read why we should come back to these words. And Zipporah jumps up with a zeal and says, I want to be part of this covenant, and I'm going to take it into my hands to accomplish and do and make sure I'm with you, Moshe. Let's do it just like he said.
What a beautiful picture.
It's a whole different thing than what we've been told.
Boy, that cleared that up nicely, Eric. I'm glad we finally got around to doing this one, because I know there's a lot of people with questions about this, and that was so beautifully put. I really appreciate you taking the time to break that down for us.
You were talking the other day about there's two words for contaminated, abominated. One was shachat, shin kuzari, and the other one I said had a tet in it. Well, here it is.
Tahor.
Leviticus 19:30. Yahweh saying, back up a couple of verses. The inhabitants of the land who are before you committed all these abominations and became, or the land became contaminated. So that's verse 27. So, to create an doing abominations is ayin bet tav, and they became contaminated is tet mem aleph. Let not the land disgorge you for having contaminated it, as it disgorged the nation that was before you. See, Yahweh built. We keep talking about this system that Yahweh built in a mechanics, a flow. It's in the DNA of the universe that when people do evil and abominations, the land itself will spew, vomit, disgorge itself from the peoples. If anyone commits any of these abominations, the people doing so will be cut off from among their people. Verse 30, you shall safeguard my charge, shomer my instructions. Do not do any of the abominable traditions that were done before you, and not contaminate yourselves through them. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, chapter 19, verse 1, speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, say to them, you shall be kadosh, for kadosh I am, Yahweh your Elohim. Okay, the word tet mem aleph. We're going to do that, and then we're going to get out of this land of mosquitoes.
Yeah, whenever you get in the lush green part, the mosquitoes come out.
Yahweh says, you do certain behaviors, you eat certain foods, and you become tet mem aleph, to become unclean, polluted, defiled, impure, forbidden for eating. Tet mem mem, a related word, to stop up or fill up, to become tet mem, stupid,
Cool.
kneaded into a lump. That's like the word for a tumor.
Yeah.
Dull, thick, dumb, stupid. If you eat certain foods and conduct certain behaviors, which Yahweh called, because he's the guy who invented everything, he labeled certain things as good and not good, clean, unclean, righteous and evil. And when we cross over to do the things contrary to what is yashar, we become like a tumor, like a cancer. We become dull, thick, stupid, and unable to function as prescribed. So for Israel to come back and do the things Yahweh said, so when I realized this, I stopped eating pork and shrimp and crab, oysters, various shellfish, various fishes that don't have fins and scales. He said, be careful. He didn't say if you eat that stuff, you're going to burn in hell. He said, you will become impure, you will become defiled, and eventually the land itself will spew you out. So either the land's going to spew us out, or the land's going to regrow. And the reason for making a big deal about sitting down and not working on Shabbat, because the word shin bet means to sit, to dwell, to remain. Shin bet tav. Tav is the suffix letter. Shin being the prefix letter makes bet tav, the word bat, it's actually daughter, maiden, and one deserving of. So Shabbat itself has within it the three letters shin bet tav. One deserving of remaining to dwell is one who sits when Yahweh said to sit. Not work when Yahweh said to not work. So either we can walk in the ways of Israel being chopped down like that tree and burned in the fire, or we can be the Israel of the restoration of new growth, doing what he said to do. Learn what to eat. Learn when to stand and when to sit. It's all in the language.
I wonder how many other people have wasted so much money buying something. 100% organic beef. Oh, finally we found something good. Get it home. And it's got pig casing. How do they get away with that crap?
Because they just don't care.
You just got to waste all that money.
Well, just like that song by Chicago, getting stronger every day. You know, we might sit here, again, the rhetorical question, how many of who has to do what, when, for how long, with what heart, before there's any difference, before there's any noticeable improvement? How long did it take for these ferns to start growing after that fire?
No time at all, man. It was amazing.
How long has it been since they now look like this?
No, it's been a couple years. But
2
I
years.
mean,
Take a little view of that. See those light lavender purple and the rust-colored? Those are blossoms.
yeah.
Yahweh has allowed or caused there to be. See those green over there? Those are also blossoms, though that doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
He has allowed the stages of regrowth to go in phases of one type of plant, then another type of plant, then another, setting up an ecosystem of both plants, microorganisms, the flowerings, and then a certain type of tree, and then another type of tree. He built this place for recovery, I tell you. He built this place for recovery.
Yes, he did.
People read Matthew 24, hey, yeah, but he said it's going to get so bad nobody can live in it. I think that's a long way out. Or it could be that what might happen if we don't turn back to his words, but I keep reading in his words, this place will recover if we do what he says. That's the most powerful secret weapon on the planet. Stronger than an atom bomb. Stronger than any kind of... What's that weapon that the Russians apparently developed some kind of...
Oh, that supersonic
yeah, what
stuff.
did they call that?
I can't remember.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I think it starts with the letter S or something. Anyway, they keep inventing new weapons. None of their weapons matter. Goliath was fully loaded to the teeth, man. The only spot like Achilles' heel was right there between his eyes, and boom, that's where David hit that rock. Like Achilles' heel, Achilles couldn't be defeated except, boy, that one place. That's where they got him with an arrow, supposedly. We don't need to be fully armed. Yahweh's our Elohim. We just need to do what he said.
That's all?
Eat the right food, quit eating the wrong food, rest when he said to rest, enjoy the Moedim. Honor his name. That's where our strength is.
Stronger every day.
Stronger every day.
Hallelujah.
As a matter of fact, let me just say this. Point out one thing. In this publication, it's not part of Scripture. At the tail end of each book of the Torah, there's it in Hebrew, and here's it in English. Chazak, chazak, venit chazek. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. Let the reader proclaim. Again, that's just a publisher's footnote, but that's what they say. It's exactly the lyrics of this song by Chicago. Chazak, chazak, venit chazek.
That's
Hallelujah.
Good. All right. Shabbat shalom again. Let's roll.